Welcome back to the Goals.com podcast, where we uncover what really drives sales performance at the highest levels. Today's guest is Phil Gerard, founder of Premier Growth. Phil has built and led high-performing sales organizations for some of the most respected companies in the world. Now, through Premier Growth, he's helping small and mid-sized businesses scale faster by building the strategy, structure, and systems that fuel sustainable revenue growth. We're diving into what really makes sales teams thrive, how to fix broken processes, and what true sales leadership looks like in action. Phil, you've led billion-dollar sales organizations. What inspired you to launch Premier Growth and start helping smaller companies scale?
Well, as you said, I've had some tremendous success in the corporate world, and I was able to accomplish quite a bit and learn quite a bit, but it all came at a cost, and mostly it was the cost of time and family and community. I was on an airplane every week, multiple times, and moved my family several times, and so I always felt as though I didn't have a sense of belonging and community. And so as I started getting later in my career, I started to realize that how important that was to me. And I remember traveling with some of our sales reps and them telling me, like, I'm on this board and I'm on my local activity for this. I coach this, I'm on my HOA, all these various things. And I always said, boy, I'd like to do that, but my schedule's not predictable because I'm strapped to an airplane seat for the entire week. And moved to South Carolina in 2020. I really had it in my mind that this is, what I wanted to do was to build a business where I could still do something I'm passionate about, which is to help companies grow, but do that for companies that maybe couldn't afford somebody with my talent and knowledge and experience, and then be able to build out an ecosystem or partnership in the local community where I'm doing things like, for example, on our local entrepreneur center and a local college, doing mentorships there and, doing other things to become part of the community. And so that's really what drove me is, I'm still passionate about the building out sales processes and really demonstrating to companies how they can succeed in the sales ranks, but being home and being part of a community.
Yeah, I certainly understand. Makes sense. After decades in sales leadership, how would you define what great sales leadership truly looks like today?
I would say it's a blend of empathy and true understanding of the individuals and that coaching and leadership that is necessary to intrinsically elevate and motivate somebody to the best that they can be, combined with a very strict view on process. And, one of the things that when I engage businesses and owners as I'm consulting with them on building out their sales process, I hear quite often, yeah, but we're different. And it's true. Every business is different. Every market they serve is different. Their clients are different. All those things are different, but sales process isn't. There are things that are necessary within the system and process that the team operates in that need to be built, need to be relied on, need to be adopted and utilized by the sales organization. So I think it's the combination of those two things, the true caring about the people, motivating those people to get to their best selves, and then having a system in place that takes out the subjectivity around being able to make an evaluation of an individual for them and for you so that they know that they're succeeding. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing.
Sure. Can you recall a pivotal career moment that reshaped how you think about building or leading sales teams?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big changes for me was when I was the owner of a business that we successfully built and sold. And growing that business from an equity partner or equity owner standpoint changes your perspective on sales deployment. So I made the decision to join a company at about $3 million that we 10x grew and sold successfully. And we did that, again, by building out sales process and properly putting the team in place. But I think the change in mentality was that now you had to look at what is sales role in generating enterprise and equity value. And that was a big change for me, that even when I went back into some larger corporations into corporate type roles, I still always took the longer view of, is the moves we're making, are the things we're doing, A, aligned with the strategy of the business, and B, are they accretive to generating equity and enterprise value for the business? So I'd say that was the biggest change for me. And me working a small business like that, it wasn't unusual in the early stages of that business for me to be in the back in the manufacturing floor turning a screwdriver to help get the revenue out for, that month end. And when you have to do all those things by yourself and you don't have the resources and committees and other folks available, and you've got to be resourceful, I thought that was another big turning point for me. And then again, I brought that same work ethic and mentality to every job I had after that position. So I'd say that was a pivotal moment for me throughout my career that still stands with me today. I, again, always want to make sure I'm thinking about the equity value of and the enterprise value of the business, particularly in my current role where I help small businesses, many of them who are thinking about exit strategies and, other big changes in their business. And as they're in that scale mode, thinking about, are these things that we're doing going to help to drive that enterprise value?
For sure. I love that. You talked about building strategy, structure, and systems for sustainable growth. Where do most companies go wrong in trying to scale their sales engine?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of places. Part of it is in the mentality of building out a system where people understand the benefits and that the workflow is designed. So quite often, the things that are necessary for the management team to lead the organization or understand where the organization is creates extra work and is not in the standard workflow for a salesperson. The better you can do in building out process that's more naturally driven to the day in and day out activities of the sales organization, utilizing that, the better the adoption. And when that adoption is strong and the system aligns to that, feel like work to the people because they are now able to see, oh, I'm doing these things and it's leading to these types of results. And great example of that is one of the companies I worked with had a very highly engineered custom solution that they had to do. And there was no CRM in place. And so as we selected the CRM, we first built out the sales process, which is always the right thing to do. And then we understood that there were a lot of workflows that were necessary to understand who was managing the opportunity. Did engineering have it? Was it in pricing and proposal? Did it need more information from sales? And we built the CRM around these queues that everyone woke up in the morning and knew exactly what was in their queue. So if an engineer worked on something the night before, didn't have enough information, they'd put it back in the sales queue. The salesperson would get up, oh, okay, this is on me now. I know where it is. And so not only leadership and the rest of the organization, but the individuals knew, like, where does my deal stand? Is it being worked on? So I think, those are like important factors for success. And I think a lot of companies, they think that a CRM is going to generate sales, and all a CRM does is reflect what's happening. And so you've got to make sure you know what you want to have happen and then set your CRM to inspect to see how that's going. And then look for opportunities within not just the CRM, but your entire tech stack to say, what do we have to do different because the result that we're getting is not what we had expected? And then you can go back and analyze your wins, but more importantly, analyze your losses and know, like, why did that deal fall apart? What happened in these deals that didn't happen in these?
100%. I love that. How do you instill accountability and focus within a sales organization without creating burnout or micromanagement?
Yeah, some of that's back to the comments I just made, that importance of the accountability has to feel like natural motivation and just a natural discussion. So first and foremost, if you don't have clear expectations of what good looks like, how can you be really leading somebody towards accountability? How can you tell somebody you're doing well? And, I always got frustrated with those comments. Well, he's a real good person, or she's a real good gal. And, they really do all the right things. It's like, well, how do you know they do all the right things? Right. And so the accountability starts with a clear set of expectations and then the measures around those expectations to see, first, are they happening? And then second, how are they happening? And I think that the way that the sales organization views it best is when you don't use it as a weapon, when you use it as a tool to sit down with them in your weekly meetings with them and say, hey, I've noticed these things. Let's talk about that. Tell me what you're doing. How are you, how are you approaching this? And then you can give them advice on different ways to approach things. And now you're in a coaching and mentoring mode as opposed to accountability around, just task management and micromanagement of an individual. Is like, okay, we know where we got to get, but if we're not paying attention to the leading indicators, and this because of your product, Goals.com is very focused on those leading and lagging indicators, but not only just the indicators themselves, but how do they contribute to that ultimate success?
For sure. How does the sales acceleration framework elevate what you do with clients? Can you share a concrete example where the structure drove a measurable turnaround?
Absolutely. So the interesting thing about sales acceleration, I started this business on my own and was trying to build out all the assets and tools and capabilities that I needed in order to do this effectively. Midway through, the midway through the year, I spoke to somebody who was a sales acceleration advisor, and I said, "Tell me about this, and how does it work, and what do you get, and what are all the tools?" And I started to realize very quickly that I had years of implementation hours that I would have to put in to build out these systems and processes that they make. And meanwhile, they have them and they're world class. A great example is that we have two levels of assessment that are available to us. There's a first pass assessment that just gives a company a good indication of, hey, there's some areas that you're going to have to improve. And deep dive one that does comparative analysis. So let's say I'm working with a company that has a CFO, they have an operations leader, even somebody possibly in the sales organization, and you have them all take this assessment around what they're currently doing, and then you compare it to see, hey, some people think that you have something that is effective, but others don't. And then you can narrow in on those areas of the business that are going to be most effective. So that's a great example of a tool that is, it would have taken me a lot longer to create than it would for me to license it and have it in my operating system. And there's many other examples, playbooks and, other things that they help to build the structure of like an AI-based playbook that communicates to the rest of the tech stack and can tell whether the playbook's actually being used. Could I have created that? I don't think so, but I have that at my disposal. And so that's a great example of what that operating system provides me in terms of tools and effectiveness.
You've restructured large sales forces and improved forecast accuracy. What's your approach to leading through major change while keeping people engaged?
So one thing that I actually just published an article recently about the impact of the change, that what happens when people are subject to big changes in the way that they're going to operate their job. There's an adoption slowdown that is expected. And then there's a cleanup of your current funnel, which is always a little unnerving. So what I always tell leadership before I get started, I just want you to know right now, I am going to reduce the funnel. It's absolutely going to happen because we're going to have a new paradigm around what we're going after. We're going to be clearer on what is in the funnel today that may not meet that. We're going to get rid of stale deals that have been sitting around that we could, that don't really have a high probability of being acted upon. And then we're going to have growth from there. So we're going to get it to a clean state and then build it up from there. But then we're going to keep the hygiene of the funnel going. And so I think that's the critical piece of the adoption. And then I talked earlier about trying to integrate as many of the activities that the person has to go through into the tools that they're using. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to go do this in this one place, then I'm going to cut and paste and I'm going to move it over here. Then I'm going to go over to this other place and do the exact same thing yet another time. That kills adoption more than anything because people, especially salespeople, they don't want to be slowed down by paperwork. And your best salespeople aren't always the most diligent around doing that paperwork. So making it easy for them and then showing them how it contributes to the success of the organization overall, demonstrating, celebrating the wins, showing the people that, hey, look at this person who's really blowing out their number. Look at the things that they're doing. It's readily available right in our indicators, and you can have the same, and you now know what good looks like and how success could be had.
Hygiene of the pipeline. I like that. I'm going to steal that from you.
You're welcome to take anything I say as yours.
How do you balance the art of selling with the science, the analytics dashboards and CRMs that you've become known for implementing?
At the end of the day, you still have to influence a customer to want to do business with you. And so that's the art of the selling. So I break it into the sales process versus sales methodologies. And there's a ton of methodologies out there. And I encourage any sales leader to read and study and understand the many different ones that are out there. The one that I personally like, and it's not a commercial for spin selling, but I just happen to like the structure of spin selling because it aligns really well with the clients that I serve, which are B2B, $5 to $50 million businesses. And that selling process aligns really well with any kind of complex sales structure where you have to have multiple touch points, multiple influences, and you're going to have a longer term relationship and you're going to have to re-win your business like generation of product by generation of product. And so, but there's tons of them out there. And I read them all, and then I look at the pieces for each one that I like, and then I, kind of stay with ones that make sense for me, but using those methodologies as what's my way that I'm going to set myself up for success and then influence. And you'll find most of them, I think you've heard, you've probably seen these because I think you probably align your tech stack to making sure that it aligns to sales methodology as well, but they're all question based. The basic premise for any of it is let me do whatever I can to understand my customer's situation, the problems they may be having, and then more importantly is the problem and the impact to them big enough for them to act on it? Because if it's not, you can sell like crazy and talk about features and benefits, but if they don't have the desire to make a change to that, then you won't move them. So that's kind of the way I look at the process or the steps, the activities, the things that you do. The analytics are based on that methodology. That's where that coaching is really important. That's where a leader who understands who the individual is that's trying to influence somebody and the individual they're trying to influence. And so we use a lot of personality styles. Discovery Insights is a great one that we've used where we've trained people on picking up on those cues of what a person may be, what might be important to them, how they approach things, what do they need in terms of the way they receive information. So those are the ways that we kind of, that I've always approached that change.
Yeah, all makes sense. With today's hybrid selling environment, what skills or mindsets do you believe define top performing reps in 2025 and beyond?
To me, there is still an importance of understanding the role that you expect any individual to play. We all heard the classic hunter versus farmer and the skill set. Your best hunters are not going to be good farmers. They're going to get up every morning dreading the workload and dreading the reactionary activities and the things that they have to do. They don't want to follow up on backlog. And that same is said for those that are really strong account managers, the farmer types that really want to be able to help their client, work very closely with them, understand the ins and outs. Both those things are necessary. Now, some companies, you don't have the luxury of having large groups of multiple, and so people have to do the hybrid piece. And so I think the thing that's most important is to understand, again, what's the need of the customer. How does the customer succeed? And then building your activities and your focus around that. This is where it's in constant communication to the rest of the organization as well. So you have your operations team, you got to feed a good forecast in to make sure that your customer gets served correctly. If you have a customer service or customer care organization, how do they touch the client? What are the things that they can do? Because everybody in your organization helps selling when they understand exactly what that client means and, what they mean to the organization, how they engage and what they care about. And I think that's where the hybrid salespeople who have to do a little bit of that, prospecting as well as the account management piece have to understand those and utilize the rest of your organization, bring them in as part of your selling team, because not only will they serve your customer better, but they'll actually proactively find you additional opportunities.
If you could give one piece of advice to a VP of sales or founder trying to double their revenue next year, What would it be? And what's the biggest trap to avoid?
The first thing is believe it's possible. Doubling that's a big deal. And that's a real big deal. And you have to be practical, but you also have to be aspirational. If you don't have that aspirational attitude and be able to remove the barriers that stop you from saying, ask what has to be versus what's in the way. Like, ask yourself, if in order to double, what things would have to be true and how can I make them be true? And I think that's the starting point. I think the biggest trap to avoid. So I had a great mentor once who told me, sometimes we do things because of the data. Sometimes we do things in spite of the data, but you always look at the data. And I think that's a big trap is that you not to set up your system to provide you insight as to what's actually happening. Taking that subjectivity out of success and creating a predictable pipeline that aligns to the S&OP forecast that helps the organization, all of those things matter. And I think that all too often we're willing to look the other way on data because our gut might tell us something. And so for me, it's like, it's okay to go against the data, but look at it and make sure that you set up the data and in your tech stack and the information into a single pane of glass. One of the things that I always like to see is a combination of all of the steps. Like, if you look at a funnel and you think about, like, there's entry, and then there's advancing the sale, then there's funnel health, then there's velocity, and then there's the win rates and the close rates. If you can't see that all in one view, your success rates are less. And so that's what I'm talking about, looking at the data in context to the overall situation. Because I could sit down with a sales rep and say, hey, your entries are light. And what will they do? They'll go out and find a bunch of opportunities. But if they're not good quality opportunities, they won't be advancing. You'll see funnel health will decay because you're not seeing any changes to the stages, or you're not seeing any additional notes or other activities happening. And so that's the key for me, that the biggest trap is not paying attention, not having the data system set up properly, and more importantly, choosing to ignore it. And again, there are times when you do things even though the data says to do something else, but do it on purpose. Like, don't do that because the sales organization is pushing back on you, or because there's a change that people don't want to go through, or for any emotional reason that might be driving your thinking to ignore the data. Just do it on purpose. That's the trap.
I love that. Phil, I appreciate the conversation, from building scalable sales systems to leading transformation at every level. Your insights on structure, accountability, and leadership are pure gold for anyone looking to elevate their sales organization. For listeners who want to learn more about Premier Growth or connect with Phil directly, you can find links in the show notes. And as always, if today's episode helped you think differently about sales performance, make sure to follow the Goals.com podcast for more conversations with leaders who are redefining what it takes to win in sales. Phil, thank you again for being here.
This episode is brought to you by Goals.com, the sales performance platform built to help teams stay focused, motivated, and on track. While most CRMs just track data, Goals.com drives real results. It's simple, affordable, and designed to help your sales team hit targets faster, without the headache of complex setup or costly consultants. Whether you're using a CRM or not, Goals.com works seamlessly to elevate your performance. Book a fun, fast demo today at Goals.com.